Hello and welcome. My name is Phil Naylor, and this is Tea with the Therapist. So please pull up a chair, grab some tea, and join me for, well, that's tea. Join me for a little talk with some tea. And my name is, again, my name is Phil Naylor. Today is the conscious and unconscious. And I provide these talks on a weekly basis just to inform people of, it's my way of educating people about mental health and wellness and a little bit about how we work and to talk about the structure of our psychological processes and functioning. Sorry for my voice today. I caught a chest cold a couple of days ago, and on Friday I couldn't even talk at all. So this is a bit of a recovery. So today's tea is honey, lemon, ginger. So that's to ease my chest and throat. But I'm actually feeling okay, so it's not too bad. But anyway, just a little bit about myself. I've been working in the field of mental health as a psychotherapist and in other capacities for about 20 years, and longer than that in terms of the field of human services. So probably about 35 years in psychology related issues or fields of employment. So I've been in private practice full time for the last 5 years. I was including part-time practice. So and this is to do with, as I said, educating people about our mental health, our wellness, how we function, and it's exploring topics of interest to the participants here too. So please feel free to send in your ideas about things you'd like me to talk about or discuss. And just a little proviso that even though I am a therapist, I do have tea, and but this isn't a therapy session. This is really for education and information purposes only. So, but I'm hoping that it will be somewhat therapeutic in that you benefit from it and you can use this for your own personal use. So anyway, let's talk today. Today I'm talking about the concept of the conscious and unconscious mind. Now, this is kind of a concept that's kind of lost fashion over the number of years. I may have mentioned this before. If you go to a therapist nowadays, you're likely not to talk about unconscious processes directly. Most of the therapy today is, what we say, cognitive-based therapy that is around kind of understanding and helping us process on with us and to more or less work with our conscious mind to try and change things. And that is good and appropriate. But there's some certain disadvantages to that. I find that cognitive focused therapies tend to be a little longer and harder to acquire the results that we want. But anyway, this is just my particular take. And by the way, all of these opinions are my own personal opinions, and they may be differ with some other people. But I don't think you'll find too much that's contradicted by what's out there, either in this psychology literature or by the popular literature out there around personal development, etc. So anyway, so there's not a lot of general focus on the unconscious. Now, that concept of the unconscious and the unconscious mind is kind of still kept alive and popular. Oh, I subconsciously thought that, or I had that thing in the back of mind. Or you'll have, people talk about, oh, I unconsciously did this or that. And so people have kind of awareness of that. We do things with full awareness. And the whole concept of like unconscious in psychotherapy was a big thing back in the day. It started out with psychoanalysis and Freud and Jung and all those people that really talked about the unconscious mind, that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than we were consciously aware of. You often refer to of the diagram of, or the analogy of an iceberg. So if you look at an iceberg, only 10% is above the water and 90% is underneath the water. So our conscious mind represents 10% and our unconscious mind represents the 90% that's underneath it. So now, this lost popularity, this concept, for probably a number of reasons. one that other people had competing theories that they wanted to forward. And in a lot of ways, the behavioristic approaches kind of overtook psychoanalysis because, for one thing, they say, well, it's hard to study the unconscious, hard to measure the unconscious. What is that anyway? You know, so, and maybe we can just do just as well by, you know, our conscious processes and through the scientific method of kind of running controlled experiments and things, you know, the concept of the unconscious mind didn't kind of lend itself well to that. So, and also the psychoanalytic approach kind of took the theory that if you sort of became aware of your unconscious processes, that somehow just magically fixed you. It's like suddenly you go, oh, now I get why I did that. No, that was ridiculous. So I just won't do it anymore. But it doesn't work like that. So we found out now that we can be very aware of why we unconsciously do something, but then keep doing it anyway. So, but that's a subject for another discussion, I think. But I just wanted to talk in terms of how do we understand the conscious and unconscious now, because it's actually a concept that I work with a lot still. And I think that it's kind of been a disservice that it has kind of lost over the years. So where it gets kept alive is in the area of hypnosis, and that's really a primary modality that I use. So with the hypnosis, we're really kind of directly working with the unconscious mind. So we don't have a lot of methodologies for working well directly with the unconscious mind through regular cognitive therapy. So hypnosis is a particular tool to help us shift unconscious processes. And I find that it just helps things move along a lot quicker doing that. But let's just understand the concept of conscious and unconscious mind. And I have a very sort of simplistic way of looking at it, easy way of looking at it, understand. So nowadays, especially in the terms of mindfulness, we might more easily think of it in terms of awareness and unawareness, okay? What we're aware of and what we're not aware of. So things that we are aware of are in our consciousness or conscious mind, and things that we're not aware of are in our unconscious or our unconscious mind. So if we take a simple example of our physiological processes. So most of our physiological processes you're not aware of. Some of them you are, so you can be aware of. You can, you know, be aware of your senses, or your feelings, sensations, and things like that. You can be aware of, you know, your breathing. If you pay attention to it, you can be aware of your heartbeat, things like that. We can be aware of some of the things, but most of it is not within our awareness and not in our control. So, for example, it's hard to kind of tune into what your liver's doing, or your spleen, or, you know, how are your kidneys functioning? How's your blood pressure? You know, all this sort of thing. So there's all these processes that are going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. And most of them we can't control consciously. I mean, we can control our breathing to a certain extent. Only you can't control it. If you try and hold your breath for too long, your autonomic nervous system will take over. But for the most, you know, we can't control these unless you turn into a yogi or something that learn how to control all these sort of deep inner processes and things like that, and do these kind of miraculous feats. But we won't go into that. For the most part, most of us aren't aware of our physiological processes. And most of that's run by what we call the autonomic nervous system. It's all the stuff that keeps things going in the ground, keeping us alive, that we don't have to be aware. It's automatic. So our breathing, our heart rate, our digestive system, all the things that keep us alive are in our autonomic system, but mostly outside of our awareness. So we can say that all our physiological processes are outside of awareness. So I got a little internet connection issue there. Hopefully this is still going. But anyway, we also, though, have psychological processes that are unconscious. So if you think about our conscious awareness, so what you're consciously aware of at any given moment is sort of a limited amount of things. Right now, you may be sort of paying attention to me, or you there might be some noises in the background that you're aware of. You might be aware of how you're feeling. There might be a few thoughts going through your head. You might be experiencing some emotions or something, but that's kind of the extent of our conscious awareness. okay? But there's a lot of other things that are going on outside of our awareness as well. As a matter of fact, we don't want too many things in our awareness because it would crowd out everything that's we want to focus on and pay attention to. So one example of what's an unconscious psychological, I guess, content would be memories. So if I said, what did you do last weekend? You might be able to sort of stop for a minute and think, oh, let me think. I did this or that, and the other thing. So you retrieve some images or memories about what happened last weekend. But then the question is, well, where are those memories before I asked about them? So they were in there somewhere, but they weren't within your conscious awareness. So you had to retrieve those. And when you retrieve those memories into your conscious awareness, then they become conscious at that point. Okay. So we have a lot of our memories and information that is stored in our brains, I guess, is unconscious forward. All right. So that would be the form of information that's unconscious. But we also have processes that happen unconsciously as well. So a simple example would be, let's take reading, for example. So now reading for the most part is unconscious, not something you have to think about. But when we first learned how to read, we had to sort of memorize all the letters of the alphabet and how they made the sounds and how those sounds join together to make words and how those words join together to make sentences. And then we, developed through practice and rote memory, we developed the skill of reading, and until it then became kind of an unconscious program that's developed unconsciously. So we don't have to think about how to read every time we read. So if I look at something, we don't have to go, let me see, like, how do I read again? How do I figure it? We don't have to think about that. We just sort of look at something and we can already understand it. So it's just an unconscious process, our ability to read. And it's kind of true of anything that we learn. So if you think about, say, the first time you ever learned to drive, well, that was probably, oh dear, that was probably done very consciously. Sorry about that. I was monitoring my time. I got two time frames working here. That was probably a very conscious process. So if you remember the very first time you ever learned to drive, you would sort of sit behind the wheel and say, what are the rules of the road? And I got to remember to check my mirrors and what's coming and who's got the right of way and all those sort of things. So, we're very kind of conscious of everything that was going on. But once you learn to drive for a while, you kind of have a driving program. You don't have to think about it. When you need to drive, you just grab the keys and away you go. And then you can be thinking of other things as you're doing that. So we acquire that skill of how to drive, and it becomes kind of set into the unconscious as an unconscious program. So if you think of, learning to play a musical instrument or any skill that you have to learn, you first learn it very consciously, and then it gets installed kind of as a program in our unconscious system, so that we don't have to think about how to do that. It just automatically comes. So if you talk to athletes, for example, they'll even tell you that if they think too much about what they're doing, they're going to blow it. So they have to kind of just let their bodies kind of instinctively take over and do what they need to practice that skill. And so the unconscious is all these abilities that we've acquired that get installed, but then we don't think about them, but they're available as we need them. So for most of the part, that's a good thing, because like I say, we don't want to have to think about how to read every time we have to read, or how to drive every time we have to drive, or how to do anything when we acquire a new skill. We want it to just be there kind of as at our fingertips. And and then our conscious mind is just available to focus on the things that we really need to do right now. So for the most part, this is a good thing, except for we can also learn negative programs, dysfunctional programs. So we can learn to react in a dysfunctional way to a certain kind of a situation or stimulus. We learn to have an anxiety response. We run an anxiety program, talked about the bear and all that. So in the hypervigilance, so, we sort of fear thing, with uh, with our responses, then we can get into trouble because we have this automatic thing that takes over. And that's why it's so difficult to change consciously. A lot of our unconscious processes are involved with keeping us safe, keeping us, keeping us physically safe or psychologically safe. And so it's kind of a very fear-based sort of system. Our job one is to stay alive and to keep safe. And so a lot of our, especially our early programming when we were young, had to do with just keeping us safe. And so a lot of our safety mechanisms kick in to take over in an attempt to keep us safe, but often it is not an appropriate response. We have these fear mechanisms, so anxiety response to something that is something that we shouldn't have an anxiety response, or we don't want to have an anxiety response to. So that becomes this sort of unconscious program that we run. So if we start to think of ourselves as kind of all these programs, one way to think about it is a computer in terms of the screen and the hard drive of a computer. The screen is our conscious mind. So the screen of a computer only displays the things that you want to look at. So you may only have a limited number of things on the screen. You have a couple of programs open. You have your web browser, and maybe you got your email program, and maybe you got a music program, and a couple of other things going. Not at a time. You have to toggle between your programs, or between the windows that are open on your web browser and things like that. So the computer only displays a limited amount of information on the screen, and that's all you want. You don't want the computer to display all the information it has on the screen. It makes absolutely no sense. So you need that limited amount of information on the screen. But the hard drive of the computer is where most of the information is. It stores all the images and information, pictures, music, data, word processing files, all of that is stored in there, as well as the programs that make them run. So including the operating system of the program, of the whole computer, thing that makes the whole computer run totally. So all of these things are kind of running in the background of a computer. And all you need to do is, like if you look at a smartphone, if you look at all the apps, those are little programs. And you just, if you want something on the app, you just click the app and that program opens so that we can use that program. So if you think of ourselves as our unconscious filled with a bunch of apps, and they just run when we hit them, that's what kind of takes over our behavior often. So sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a not so good thing. So we are largely sort of this programmed being. We have a lot of habits, a lot of programs that we launch, and they run automatically. And it's hard to change those easily, because once a program runs, it wants to run, especially if it's a program that's around safety and security. That's always going to overrule our logic. So if you have ever, tried to tell yourself when you're anxious and scared about something, like, don't be scared, don't scared about this. So your unconscious mind isn't listening to it. It's saying, shut up, I'm afraid of this thing. It's, this thing's dangerous. And the other part of our mind, no, we need to not do this. Our is trying to tell it not to, and our unconscious says, go away, I'm scared. So it's really hard to change things consciously, except to a lot of repetition. And through other means like hypnosis, we can get at that unconscious programming and change that in an easier way, because in a lot of ways, we need to get the conscious mind out of the way to use these other kinds of approaches that work directly with the unconscious mind. So that's a little bit about the conscious and unconscious. And I like to think, if we think of ourselves as kind of habitual beings, that we learn things and we install them as programs, and we like to run those programs all the time. You can even think of our personality as a kind of a program that we run. It's just the thing that kind of takes over every day when we get up, and it just kind of runs too. So it's hard to change our program, It's hard to change an app. People have an accent. They don't even realize they have an accent until they go to another country. And then they, or they hear other people's accents. That it's hard to recognize your own accent. So that's also an acquired kind of unconscious program. So I understand conscious and unconscious, what's in your awareness, what's not in your awareness. And as content that's not in your awareness, and programs that run unconsciously. You might want to think of our unconscious programs as kind of the autonomic nervous system of our mind. They're things that run automatically, okay? And so that gives us a new approach on how we might work with ourselves and work with changing behaviors that we need to change. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about hypnosis and other processes to work with changing that aren't necessarily focused on kind of logical, deduction and reasoning ourselves into things. We need to those things. I'll give one more analogy to help understand the conscious and unconscious mind, and that is the captain and crew of a cruise ship. So if you think of a cruise ship, they're massive things, and they take a lot of your engine crew, and you got your entertainment crew, and your kitchen crew, and your people that are running all aspects of the ship. And then you have the captain, who is in charge of kind of in charge of where the ship's going and the destination, makes the decisions around where the ship's going and what we do, and the activities of the ship. So now if you think of a cruise ship, it can't turn immediately. It takes like 10 miles to turn that ship. And so it needs to, that can't change on a dime. Sometimes it takes a little bit of, now the captain isn't the one that carries out the stuff on this cruise ship. It just provides the instructions. It just tells the crew what to do. The captain instructs the crew what to do, and the crew carries it out. So that's sort of like the conscious mind. It instructs us, I want to get up and go across the room and get that book or something. And then we have all these unconscious processes that take over and do that. We don't consciously are aware of how do I get up? We can direct ourselves to get up, but the coordination of all those little muscles and all that kind of thing, and our balance to take us across the room, that's totally unconscious. So the captain directs the crew. And so it gives orders and the crew carries it out. And I'll develop that analogy a little bit later when we talk about change, because that involves how does the conscious or the captain instruct the crew on doing things different, because the crew, once they get the routines down how to run that ship, it's hard for them to change things suddenly, to turn around and change what they're doing when they know how to do all the things they're doing. Okay, so if they go on a new cruise ship destination with new itinerary and things, they have to relearn all that stuff and redo it. So sometimes you get a grumpy crew that doesn't want, they already know how to do those things, but the captain has to keep kind of encouraging them to carry out the instructions and head to a new destination. So more of that later at another time. So I guess I'll just wrap up for now, that concept of conscious and unconscious. I'll continue in later talks a little bit about hypnosis and how to use different tools to initiate change that are beyond just simple talk therapy. Okay, so thank you for joining me. Please put any comments in that you would like, and provide any suggestions for me of any topics that you would like to hear from or hear about, or for me to elaborate on. But in the meantime, thank you for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Put these out usually every Sunday, and thereabouts. So you can get this on Facebook. I'll be posting them on Facebook and also on my YouTube channel. Okay, so thanks for joining me, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care.